Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. I was called out for an emergency dive on April 12, 2013. At the time, I primarily handled forensic and rescue dives, but this was entirely different. Usually, when I'm called, time is critical. For instance, someone might be in immediate danger, or a time-sensitive object might need retrieval. This time, however, the objective was unclear. My initial thought was that something catastrophic had occurred. I'd been summoned in the dead of night without warning, with vague mentions of a geological event. I wasn't briefed, and everyone involved stonewalled me with repeated "I don't knows." I recognized most people in my line of work statewide, but these individuals were unfamiliar, gray-faced, anonymous nobodies. They drove me all the way to Greenbrier Valley, West Virginia. Picture a remote dirt road packed with government vehicles. Among them, I noticed personnel from the USACE, United States Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, USGS, United States Geological Survey, and WVDNR, West Virginia Division of Natural Resources. Those were just the ones I recognized. Half the vehicles were unmarked or outright fabrications. One even claimed to be a catering service. As I was rushed through the crowd, chaos reigned. Some people were yelling into phones, others were shouting at each other. One red-faced, middle-aged man was practically in tears, waving papers at a young woman who only nodded and smiled in response. Amid the commotion, people began peppering me with questions. How long will your prep take? Did you bring your own gear? Are you signed in? Where's the sign-in sheet? I spotted a few familiar faces among the chaos. Garrett, who'd just turned 44, and Nora, whom I'd done rescue dives with before, were already gearing up. While there were others I vaguely recognized, Garrett and Nora stood out. They were suiting up for a cold dive, checking their equipment. As I signed some papers thrust into my hands, I noticed a group forming around a USACE representative and a woman in a professional pantsuit. "You've got 12 hours, said the woman. "Not a second longer, this is private property." Garrett motioned me over and I sat beside him on a log to start suiting up. "Someone needs to talk to me," I demanded. "What's going on here?" "Earthquake," Nora replied. "Not a major one, but yeah." "And what does this have to do with an earthquake?" I asked. "The lake," Garrett said. "You'll see." As I continued putting on my gear, we were rushed forward. They grabbed my arm, bombarding me with questions along the way. When we emerged through a clearing, I saw what had once been a lake. It was now a dry bed of dirt. Hundreds of seagulls screeched as they picked at dying fish, while men in hazmat suits stumbled in the mud, trying to chase them off. At the lakebed's center was a hole about 6 by 4 feet, the only spot still holding water. Around it were tables, security tape, and red flags. A dozen people worked at laptops, crunching numbers and taking measurements. A woman suddenly appeared beside us, urging us forward. The first hints of sunlight warmed the horizon, still an hour from dawn. "We're doing a blind dive," she said. "We need constant communication about anything you find. You'll be going in within the hour." "We're not doing that," Garrett said. "There's no emergency here. There's no—" He didn't finish. The woman shoved him into the mud. "You are doing this," she snapped. "You're doing this. We're not doing anything until we get— Do you see that?" She cut Garrett off, pointing at the fleet of vehicles. "That right there is a promise that I will ruin your life. Now you do this, or you'll never even drink a glass of water again." Nora helped Garrett to his feet, and we moved quickly toward the hole. The screeching seagulls drowned out almost everything else, and I was grateful for the rubber mask shielding me from the overwhelming stench of rotting fish. 2 men scrambled to handle the basics, but it was clear we had nothing. There was no dive plan, no data on the temperature, stability, currents, nothing at all. They didn't have a clue what they were doing. The only thing they could confirm was the sheer size of what we were about to enter. A massive cave system revealed by the quake, drained of lake water, measuring about 350 feet wide and 700 feet deep, all underground. I struggled to process the enormity of it. We tested our linked masks and agreed on using individual tracking lines. The plan was a 20-minute dive, followed by 25 minutes for resurfacing and depressurization. We'd rotate air tanks and maintain constant contact with the surface. If we encountered the slightest issue, we'd abort immediately. If communications failed, we'd surface, no exceptions, though we all knew hand signals by heart. There was absolutely no room for error. As we finished setting up, someone handed us chisels and self-sealing bags. "Collect samples of everything," they instructed. "Everything." Let's put this into perspective. At this point, we knew almost nothing. The quake had exposed a cave system beneath private property. Its size and depth were staggering, and in less than 12 hours, we'd be forced off-site, likely so they could conduct their own tests. This system had likely been sealed off for tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years. Someone even mentioned the Karoo Ice Age, though that seemed far-fetched. This place could either hold groundbreaking discoveries or turn out to be a total waste of time. By the time we dipped our feet into the water, nearly 2 hours of our window had already passed. The water was far colder than anticipated. As I sat on the edge, legs dangling in the murky depths, a technician double-checked my air tanks. "Exciting, huh?" He grinned. "I'm jealous." "Why?" I asked. "You get to explore," he chuckled. "An untouched space no human has ever seen." "That's not always a good thing," Nora replied. "There's plenty of that on the ocean floor, too." We made the plunge. The water was so murky from mud and reeds that visibility was almost non-existent, so we descended straight down. It got colder with every foot, and particles of debris zipped past me like rain in a storm. The deeper we went, the heavier the unease grew in my chest. I'd never been so unprepared for a dive, and this felt far beyond anything I'd ever done. There's a reason cave diving is so dangerous. It's truly uncharted territory. At about 25 feet, we hit the lake bed. The cave wall was jagged and rough, coated with a thin crystal layer. Likely salt, I guessed. Nora collected a sample while voices crackled faintly in our ears. Most of it was indecipherable. "Go deeper," one voice said. "There's nothing up there." We found 3 tunnels leading further down. The first was too narrow. My gear risked catching on the walls, so we retreated and tried another. Eventually, we found one wide enough to move through comfortably, though it was more like crawling than swimming. "Turtle 1, we're picking up seismic activity," a voice said. "Please respond." "Stand by, equalizing," I replied. I could hear the camera on my shoulder whirring softly. Garrett's voice came through the local channel. "There's no way the signal holds," he muttered. "Just granite and quartz. This is pointless." "Resurface in 10, I instructed. "Check for..." We found samples in the cracks as the tunnel led us to a small cave. The water here was clearer, but the space was cramped, only about 15 by 20 feet and no more than 6 feet high. It was just enough room to regroup, check our tethers, and take a few samples. Nora discovered some kind of transparent goo in a crack along the wall, while Garrett worked on chiseling a chunk of granite. I thought I saw something shimmering in the corner, but it turned out to be my camera's light reflecting off a quartz fragment. Still, I grabbed it. I wasn't about to resurface empty-handed. When our time was up, we ascended for air, moving slowly and methodically, but with results. Reaching the bottom within 12 hours was out of the question, yet we believed further dives could yield something meaningful. As we surfaced, a crowd of at least 50 people had gathered, forming a circle around us. Men in hazmat suits brought coolers for the samples, while 2 technicians worked on a hookah air hose system. We took a brief break as they completed the setup, swapped out our air tanks, and prepared for a deeper dive. With the new system, we could now reach depths of up to 60 feet, though they were already working on an extension. Garrett, ever cautious, insisted we refresh our tanks as a backup. As we connected the hoses, The chemical smell of tank air was replaced by a musky forest breeze, laced with the scent of dead fish, mud, and a faint trace of diesel from a nearby generator. We plunged back into the murky waters, heading straight for the tunnels. This time, we pushed past the reeds and mud, delving deeper into the system. We mapped 3 more tunnels that extended even further down. Using the air hoses as tethers, we advanced cautiously, but before long, we hit the limit of their reach. Nora called it in. "Surface control, we need a longer line." There was no response. We waited, but silence met us. By then, it was likely dawn. As Garrett had predicted, we'd gone too deep to maintain a clear signal. "I can surface to relay," Garrett suggested, "or we could try tugging and hope for the best." "I'm not tugging an air hose," Nora chuckled. "This DN... What? Are you hearing the..." Static crackled intermittently in our ears, and the camera on my shoulder whirred incessantly. Nora gave the hand signal for resurfacing and took point. Garrett and I followed, but a low rumble from below made us pause. The ground seemed to vibrate, like the start of a diesel engine, accompanied by cycles of groaning and cracking rock. Something massive was happening, and we had no time to waste. My breathing grew shallow as panic set in. Air no longer felt like a guarantee. The instant Nora passed through the first tunnel, I saw the rock wall shift. Solid, razor-sharp granite moved like paper crumpling in a child's hand. With a deafening roar, the tunnel collapsed. Our air hoses snapped, and the falling rock crushed Nora's foot into pulp, spraying bone fragments and air into the water. The sound of our collapsing world thundered in my ears, shaking me to my core. Then the water surged. We were being dragged down. I curled up, shielding my head as the current flung me through the tunnels, deeper and deeper. My air tank scraped against the walls, and I felt a rush of water flooding my mask. The hose had been severed. There was no air supply left. Walls blurred past as I was thrown about, my body colliding with unyielding rock. My shoulder slammed into one side, then my knee, my thigh, my shoulder again. At one point, I hit the back of my head hard, feeling an instant shift in temperature, a fresh wound, though not a deep one. Amid the chaos, my shoulder-mounted camera tore loose and I began spinning uncontrollably, losing all sense of direction. This wasn't just a quick suction. The pull lasted long enough for my world to collapse into disorientation. I was battered repeatedly, blood leaking from cuts I couldn't even feel anymore. My body grew colder with every passing moment, though I couldn't tell whether it was from blood loss or the freezing water. The word disoriented barely began to describe it. It doesn't even begin to describe it. At some point, everything just stopped. I was floating in an endless void of darkness, an infinite bottomless ocean. I couldn't tell which way was up or down anymore. When I tried to move upwards, it didn't feel right. My arm refused to respond, and the resistance was overwhelming. It took me a few seconds to realize I was trying to swim downwards. I was upside down. Water was pooling inside my mask, just below my mouth. I could see tiny air bubbles rising, forcing me to spit to keep my mouth clear. It had a strange, sugary taste mixed with iron. Most of it was blood. Something grabbed me. My first instinct was to fight back, but I couldn't. My arm was strained. My left foot dislocated and I was trembling uncontrollably. A long gash stretched across my thigh, just visible in the faint beam of my mask light. Beyond that, I couldn't even see my feet. Garrett came into focus, making a hand signal I didn't recognize. A closed fist, fingers pushing outward. A push. An exhale? Right. I exhaled forcefully, clearing the water from my mask. A second later, Garrett connected my air tank to my mask. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He had a nasty cut above his right eye, and blood was trickling into his mask. Our comms were dead, forcing us to rely on hand signals. Garrett placed a hand on my cheek and checked my mask for cracks. It seemed intact. He signaled, "Okay?" I replied in kind, though I wasn't okay. Still, I could move, albeit slowly. We advanced cautiously, trying to conserve air. We had at most less than an hour of air if we stayed calm. likely even less. Holding hands, we ascended steadily. Finally, I felt oriented, but despite our progress, it seemed as though we hadn't moved at all. The water was still pitch black, with nothing changing around us. Suddenly, Garrett stopped. I caught up to him, following his gaze upward. Tiny shimmers danced in the water, a school of fish, dozens of them, about 4 inches long, with azure blue bodies and eyeless faces dominated by thick, octopus-like beaks. They darted past us at incredible speed, clearly avoiding us. They were close enough to touch, but Garrett didn't, and neither did I. Whatever they were, they belonged here, and they could be venomous. Garrett tightened his grip on my hand, and we continued upwards. After about 10 minutes of swimming, we hit a dead end, a solid rock ceiling. There was no sign of an opening or tunnel. It occurred to me we might have descended horizontally through a side passage. If that were true, we were like flies buzzing against a window, desperate to escape. We scanned the ceiling, but it was flat and featureless, giving us no indication of where to go. I forced myself to stay calm. Panicking would only kill us faster. But even in this vast empty space, I'd never felt more trapped. Holding my breath, I tried to suppress the shivering. Garrett retrieved his chisel and began probing the rock. A few kernels of granite broke loose, slowly drifting left as they sank. A current, relief surged through me. Still, I couldn't ignore the time slipping away. Garrett's diving watch was broken, and mine hadn't been reset after our second dive. It was still synced to the first. This was exactly the kind of disaster I'd wanted to avoid, but we'd been too stressed to double-check. Finally, the ceiling began to curve, revealing an opening. It led upwards. We squeezed through, inching forward in a claustrophobic tunnel. I had to exhale just to fit through, my chest aching under the pressure of unstable rock. Breathless and desperate, we shimmied forward until, at last, we broke the surface. Just like that. But we weren't topside. It was an air pocket, just big enough for the two of us if we squatted slightly. A tunnel led further ahead, but we decided to catch our breath. I was the first to switch off my air and clear my mask, and Garrett quickly followed suit. For the first time, we could speak freely. The stale, sugary sweet air burned as it filled our lungs. I coughed, sending a jolt of pain through my aching ribs. The lake water, Garrett wheezed. It wasn't settled. The temperature shift from the sunrise, it heated it, got it moving. So where are we? How deep? I asked. 300 feet, at least. Just straight down. Nora, did you? No, Garrett interrupted, shaking his head. It's closed. She might be trapped up there, but at least she won't drown. I nodded as I gently touched my injured foot. I'd have to pop it back into place, but even grazing the skin sent bolts of pain up my shin bone. You can wait, Garrett said softly. You're hurt. I'm not dying here, I muttered. Good. We caught our breaths and checked our equipment. We had about 3/4 of our air left, which wasn't bad. We'd taken some hits, cuts and bruises, some that might need stitching, but nothing immediately life-threatening. Still, we couldn't ignore the bacteria lurking down here. I couldn't stop shivering, and Garrett kept asking if I felt sleepy. I couldn't lie. My eyelids were heavy and my lungs strained with each breath. We re-entered the water, ensuring our equipment was clean and secure. The tunnels were wider now, allowing us to crawl forward. At several intersections, we marked our path with scraps of my torn air hose. Shoving pieces into cracks like breadcrumbs, at least we'd be able to find the air pocket again. We explored tunnel after tunnel, each one ending in a dead end. It was a damn labyrinth. With every stop, my hope dwindled. Finally, we found a path leading forward, but faced a tough choice. Circle back and regroup, or push ahead and save precious time. Backtracking felt like defeat, but moving forward could mean death. Garrett squeezed my hand, searching for guidance. I signed, forward. The tunnel opened into a vertical shaft. The water flowed gently downward, pushing against us. It was faint, but enough to remind me the current was growing stronger. Suddenly the water shimmered, and a school of azure-colored fish shot past us, rushing deeper into the tunnels. Maybe they followed the current. Wherever they came from, we followed. Garrett gave my hand a celebratory squeeze. Ahead, the shaft split into multiple branches. Each looked deep enough to lead somewhere. We picked one at random. My scraps were gone, so I had nothing left to mark our path. We climbed steadily upward until Garrett froze. Shimmering objects reflected our mask lights ahead. Gems, quartz, no, eyes. Nightmare eyes. Predatory, cold, and unfeeling. They stared at me as though I wasn't a person, just meat. The creature lunged from the dark, long bony arms stretched forward, its frame like a rubbery spider monkey. Its needle-sharp teeth were designed for stripping flesh from bone. It didn't swim. It crawled along the rocky walls with terrifying speed, effortlessly catching the fleeing azure fish. Large as it was, the tight tunnel barely slowed it. Garrett and I could move freely. It could not. We were never meant to encounter something like that. Never. Even now, I can't look down dark corridors. I see those arms reaching for me. Every safety instinct I had vanished. I panicked. I screamed, kicked, and crawled, forcing myself back down as fast as possible. Pain tore through me with every movement, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to get away. My foot throbbed, but I had no choice. I had to keep moving. The only thing I felt was the water churning behind me, each sudden movement creating waves that battered my exhausted limbs. But none of it mattered. At that moment, the only thing I cared about was escape. Just as I reached the tunnel's mouth, I glanced back and locked eyes with Garrett. His wide, terrified gaze told me everything. I knew he realized his fate. He was going to die. Long, sinewy fingers coiled around him, and I watched in horror as his right arm was wrenched from its socket. The snap echoed through the tunnel, reverberating like a death knell. His screams reached me in vibrations, but all I could truly hear was my own panicked breathing. I remember brief flashes of shimmering azure as I darted through the maze of tunnels, one after another after another. I didn't see a single marker to guide me. Each misstep sent pain shooting through my foot, tears blurring my vision. My face stung, the edges of my nose raw from crying. There was another air pocket ahead, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had no idea where I was, but I could feel those cold, dark eyes searching for me. I could imagine those arms reaching, grasping. The air in my tank started feeling strange, warmer than it should. Panic surged through me and I pushed forward blindly. When I found another air pocket, I ripped off my mask and twisted the air tank shut. My mouth filled with the metallic taste of blood and salt, and I couldn't stop sobbing. The space was tiny, barely big enough for me to tilt my head and breathe. The light on my mask flickered, dying a slow death. Holding it at just the right angle kept it steady for now, but I knew it wouldn't last much longer. I crouched there for at least 10 minutes, just trying to calm my ragged breaths. I felt lost, cold, and utterly alone. Time had lost all meaning. How long had I been down here? I didn't know. Worse, I had no way of knowing how much air was left in the tank, but it wasn't much. If I wanted to move, I had to ration it. But moving without air wasn't an option. There was no way I'd be lucky enough to stumble on another air pocket within a minute of free diving. Still, staying put wasn't an option either. No one up there could be trusted. No rescue was coming, not here. And even if that creature wasn't lurking in the dark, I'd freeze to death before anyone found me. Then it hit me. I was bleeding. My heart slammed against my ribs as fear coursed through me. Blood. Shit. My pulse quickened as I sensed something shift in the water, a pressure in the tunnel below. I froze, paralyzed. There was no way I could outswim it. My only hope was that it wouldn't find me, that it didn't hunt like a shark. I held my breath, desperate to stay silent, but I felt the faint ripples of something moving closer. Tears welled up again, slipping from my tightly shut eyes and plopping into the water with what felt like deafening noise. Every sound felt amplified, hammering at my ears. The movement stopped, and I could feel its presence, too close for comfort. I opened my eyes cautiously, but all I saw was darkness. My mask light had finally died. A few agonizing moments passed, and then the strokes in the water resumed, gliding past me. Maybe it didn't recognize me as prey, or maybe it was taking Garrett back to its lair. I didn't know and I didn't care. When the water stilled, I exhaled sharply, coughing violently. My mouth tasted like copper. There was no choice left. I had to keep going no matter how little air or energy I had. I secured my mask and let my hands float in the water, trying to center myself. The stillness was alien, primal, a sensation I'd never experienced before. I'd faced danger before, but nothing like this. Nothing even close. I slowed my breathing and dove again. Surprisingly, with the light gone, it became easier to sense the current. Maybe my other senses were heightened in the dark, but I could feel the flow guiding me, clearer than before. The current nudged me upward, so I followed it, letting instinct take over. As I neared a branching tunnel, I hesitated. The way wasn't obvious, but I chose the path that sloped upward, the current growing stronger with each stroke. Then I surfaced into another air pocket, but this time I heard something, metal clinking. My heart leapt when I found the source. Garrett's air tank. Relief and dread warred within me. On one hand, I'd been incredibly lucky to find it. On the other, I knew that thing was nearby, so close I could feel its presence in my bones. With only a little air left in my tank, I forced myself to hobble forward. The air pocket I'd surfaced into was larger than the others, a cavern with ankle-deep water that made walking unavoidable. Every step reminded me of my body's weight, heavier than I'd ever felt before. The gear didn't help. Exhaustion clawed at me, tempting me to lie down and just give up, sleep or death, whichever came first. But I kept moving, clutching an extra tank in my trembling hands. I pushed onward, always heading up. Holding my breath as long as possible, I only used air when it felt absolutely necessary. Schools of tiny fish brushed past me, sometimes ahead, sometimes darting back. It occurred to me they might be fleeing a predator, and I felt like an idiot for not following their lead. Then again, maybe they were just riding the current. I had no way to know. Hours passed as I flailed through caves and tunnels, desperately searching for air pockets and eventually ditching my empty tank. Garrett's tank was my only hope now, though every step felt like digging my own grave. Maybe if we just stayed put, someone would have found us. Maybe trying to be proactive was the real mistake. The air in Garrett's tank started to go bad as I reached yet another pocket. Frustrated, I threw the tank aside, the metallic clang echoing through the cavern. That's when I heard it, a noise, faint but unmistakable. A gasp. Something had heard me. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, as wet, heavy footsteps slapped against the cave floor. The sound was paired with a strange, guttural breathing, almost amphibian. I balanced painfully on my good foot, trying to stay motionless. It stopped, listening. Blood from my arm dripped into the water with faint plops. My breath hitched, but it didn't seem to notice, or care. Moments later, I heard a bone snap, sharp and sickening, followed by wet gnawing and eager suckling. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, listening to it feast. When it finally slinked down a side tunnel, disappearing into the depths, I knew this was my only chance. I moved as fast as I could, only to step on something. Looking down, I saw a partially devoured foot. Revulsion threatened to overwhelm me, but I pushed forward. From that point, my movements became methodical. Plunge into the water. Follow the current for 30 seconds. If there was no clear way forward, turn back, catch my breath, and try another route. My chest burned from holding my breath so much, and my injured foot throbbed with every kick. Eventually, I reached a large vertical chute. A strong current rushed upward, promising hope. I held my breath and let it carry me, desperate for an air pocket or a surface above. Instead, I slammed into a smooth, unyielding surface. Disoriented, I felt the material. It was thin, heavy, and metallic. Panic surged as I pounded against it, my fists echoing in the water. Then, something brushed against my good leg. Gentle, probing fingers began to curl around my ankle. I thrashed wildly, kicking with everything I had, but the grip tightened, pulling me down. I managed to break free, clawing and propelling myself upward with all my strength. Again, I crashed into the metal surface, but this time it buckled, just slightly. A sliver of light seeped through. The metal shifted. Suddenly, there was air, blinding light, and a group of hands grabbing me. 4 men had moved what looked like a makeshift manhole cover, pulling me to safety. I gasped, filling my lungs, but I couldn't stop screaming and screaming. Nora had made it to the surface, too. She'd lost a foot, but she survived. They airlifted her out, sealing the entry behind her. They'd tried to send another dive team, but there was no one available nearby. I'd been trapped for 9 hours and 37 minutes. Afterward, I was forced to sign a contract agreeing not to speak about it for 10 years. That time has passed, and now I'm telling you what happened. Garrett didn't make it, and Nora was permanently maimed. I walked away alive, but not unscathed. Some wounds aren't as visible as a missing limb. That place was bought by an investment company called Hatchet. They're still operating there, surrounded by chain-link fences, warning signs, and armed guards. I've since given up diving. Even swimming in a pool feels impossible. And honestly, I'm okay with that.